Hi, I'm Emily, and this is the Wholesome Wave podcast. These conversations are to inspire emotional wellness, healing, and growth. Because the change you create in yourself ripples outwards, transforming those around you and the generations to come. So, my guest today is a courageous truth teller, someone who refuses to blend in, who dares to stand apart, and who lives in full alignment with the wisdom she shares. She doesn't just teach this emotional work, she really embodies it. It's an absolute privilege to welcome Jin Ong to my podcast.
Thanks so much, Emily. This is amazing to be on your podcast all these years later.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. So, Jin, your journey and insight transformed me when I studied emotional body release with you and continues to transform lives right across the world. So, just to give listeners a bit of an introduction, Jin was born in Melbourne, Australia, to Malaysian Chinese parents, and she grew up navigating conventional paths, all while having a deep knowing that she was here to do things differently. Jin is professionally trained as an osteopath, Western medical acupuncturist, and herbalist. After working with many clients in her physical clinics, Jin reached a turning point as a result of her own health journey that she was personally experiencing and what she was witnessing in her clients. Despite doing all the things with her clients and trying everything herself, she tries restrictive diets and acupuncture and herbal concoctions and harsh chemical peels and mindset work. Nothing created lasting change. Everything only helped temporarily, but didn't get that true transformation. Plus, for her, the range of symptoms that she was experiencing kept getting worse. So she had severe cystic acne, she was getting sick all the time with colds and flus, she had recurring fevers, she got an ulcer on her eye, joint stiffness, and she even broke out in rashes and hives on unusual places on her body. What she was sensing was that beneath the physical pain, injuries, and symptoms, there were unresolved emotions, hidden traumas, and years of suppressed truth. Her clients' bodies were speaking loudly, and so was hers. But they couldn't understand what it was saying, and neither could she. There was this deep emotional disconnect. Until that is, she stopped trying to fix her symptoms and began processing the emotions. Gosh, it sounds so simple. Then, trusting her intuition and driven by a desire to bring healing to others, Jin began to step away from osteopathy and instead started interpreting the emotional language behind physical and mental presentations. As her clients opened up, she guided them through her unique process to release what had been long stored in their bodies, and the results were just undeniable. Emotional clarity, physical healing, and lives realigned with soul purpose. Jin, your story is just so powerful. From conventional medicine to uncovering the emotional roots behind physical pain. I wonder if you can just take us back to some of those first moments when you realized that what you and your clients were experiencing wasn't just physical, but deeply emotional.
Thank you so much. You've done a really great summary of my pain story that I've been able to transform. So I really appreciate it, how concisely you've communicated it. For me, it really was my osteo life where I got to see many thousands of clients. There was a point in time where I'd be seeing 50 to 70 clients a week. And so that is where I really got exposed to the repeated patterns that I could no longer ignore. And I got really curious as to why some clients were responding like a textbook to protocols and treatments, and then why others weren't, who seemed to have very similar injuries, symptoms, and presentations. And I guess as an osteopath, we were seen as being a little less conventional. And so we did have slightly longer appointments, half an hour to an hour, to get to really know the person that you're working with. And there was more time to have conversation with them as their pain started to improve. But I got to question why weren't they progressing as quick as I thought they should? And it really was revealed in the conversations that we were having during the sessions and the treatments when we would speak about other aspects of their life that I realized that they were living a life that felt incongruent or was out of alignment. Biggest and most obvious examples were their relationship. They weren't happy in their relationship. They knew that they needed to make decisions that they weren't making. They were in a low level of discomfort. And likewise, another great example is their job. They felt like they had to be in their job to pay their mortgage, to put their kids through school, and so on, and they felt trapped. Yeah, there's a whole other bunch of facets of life that people would show me. But I started to see the patterns as to the physical pain and symptoms people were experiencing on a musculoskeletal level and the deeper emotions and happenings in their life that maybe contributed to it.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we do tend to like compartmentalize things, right? And we go, oh, well, that's just my relationship, or that's just my work, that's just my kids. But actually, we can't separate any of, oh, and that's just my body. But we can't
Yeah.
separate any of those things. They all feed into each other, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of people talk about a holistic approach and a whole body, whole facet of life approach, but the human in us still likes to segment and compartmentalize, as you say.
Mm. And so when the pandemic forced your osteo clinics to close for a significant period of time, you were finally given that nudge to stop hiding and you started your company, The Art of Listening to Your Body. And that's when I came across you in 2020 when we had that massive worldwide lockdown. And you were posting these amazing free videos, which I began listening to and which really resonated with me. And I think I consumed them all. I would go outside into the garden, stick my headphones on when I wanted to get away from things and just listen to them. And what hit me was the uh, little video that you did about how our scars hold emotions. And it really got my attention because I'd had three cesarean sections. So I had some pretty big scars. And I'd never ever considered that I was holding emotions in those scars. And I think I'm probably fairly typical of most people that is holding on to a lot of emotions, but not having any idea that I was.
Mm.
For someone listening who thinks, oh, yeah, but my life's fine, I don't have any big trauma, I've had a relatively smooth life, what are some ways that suppressed emotions might be showing up in their body or in their life that they might not recognize?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to acknowledge how we met because I believe that you were qualified as an architect and you were a full-time mum. And during the pandemic, I did a big pivot into the online space. I had to get over caring what other people thought. I had to get over myself. I had to do something because we had a lot of money going out of the clinic every month. And at the same time, you had a big pivot. And I see you now as a body and an internal architect for humans. And, now I get very strict about who I take on board, but you're one of the people that I took a chance with that had no history of working with people or patients or clients. And you're one of the very few that have actually continued to do this emotional work and coach people. So I really love that and that we've stayed in touch all of these years since the beginning of the journey. And now you're doing your own podcast.
Well, I have to say, because when I remember you said, or I emailed you about the scars that I had and told you a bit about myself, and I knew that you did this emotional body training for practitioners, and I thought, damn, I'm not a practitioner, and if only I was a practitioner. Anyway, we ended up having that conversation, and you said to me, hey, would you be interested in doing my course? And I just about fell over backwards because I was like, well, hang on a minute, how could this be? But I'm not a practitioner. And you could obviously sense that I had a deep passion for this, and you gave me that chance. And I'm forever grateful for that chance because it really has completely changed my life and, yeah, sent me on quite a different path.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. So to go back to your question, like what if someone doesn't have any major physical pain, mental stuff, or trauma? I would say that I would love this to still be able to resonate with someone before they reach that point. Because when you do get unwell on a physical level, and my work has now gone beyond just physical issues, it's gone into mental, behavioral, energetic, spiritual manifestations, undesirable manifestations, where basically life just isn't flowing the way you want it to be. And I say that if you get hit with challenge, it really does make you look at what's going on. For some people, they've got to have major challenge before they actually do anything about it. It's just so much harder for you to actually do the work, but it's not impossible. So I would love people to be able to work on themselves and really be aware of how their life is responding around them, their relationships, their work, their money, their passion, their soul purpose, their, whatever fulfills them before they have to reach that point. Because it's so much easier to work on yourself from a healthy space than one that is challenged. Um, but I would say that I am not someone who has experienced significant trauma. However, what I've realized over the years of working with people is that trauma is very subjective what the meaning of it is. And so I like to say, well, trauma is simply stored emotion, and it is your unique experience around an event. Because two people can experience a very similar event, just like my clients having very similar injuries, but because of different upbringings, conditioning, emotional awareness, knowledge of how to process your emotions or not, space and time, that will dictate how someone navigates that experience for it to be classified as trauma to them, or for someone else just to be able to move through it and not identify with it as trauma. So I call trauma stored emotions. And I think all of us have experienced some level of storing emotions or suppressing them. And our body is great at giving us messages in the form of injuries, pain, even just like getting sick, colds, flus. For a lot of my clients, it's cancer, autoimmune disease. But also, it can just be things like anxiety. It could be things like feeling depressed and not being able to function day to day. It can be things like eating disorders. It could be hearing repeated stories in conversations. That's a pattern to listen to before it actually has to hit your body.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of little subtle things, and then we want to get them when they're subtle, right? Rather than hitting us with the brick or
Yeah,
the bus.
yeah, absolutely.
So I signed up, as I said, for your emotional body release training, and I remember being pretty nervous in that group with all these practitioners. And part of the training was obviously to go through releases ourselves.
Mm,
And you gave us a questionnaire that we had to fill in about our life. And you were reading it back to me when we came to my first release. And when we got to the section on births, I just burst into tears. And you were like, oh, well, I think we've found where we need to go. And so we processed the birth of my first child, which was pretty traumatic. So he was born by emergency C-section. He was taken out of me, and I didn't see him for about 5 or 6 hours after he was born. I didn't, for the first wee while, I didn't even know if he was alive. I was strapped to the operating table and yeah, had no idea. And then, of course, I had this baby in my arms, and thankfully he was okay. And so I pushed that experience out of the way and got on with having a baby. Um, so my release around his birth was just so incredibly powerful because it showed me that I had all this emotion that I didn't even know that I was holding. But what blew me away even more was that he was about 6 at the time when I did this release. And he had this routine every night. When I was putting to bed, he would say, Mummy, you going out tonight? And I'd say, No, I'm not. He would say, Well, what if you do go out tonight? And I'd say, But I'm not. but what if you do? And how do I know you're not going out tonight? And this would go on and on for a few minutes. And so what blew me away is that when I did that release over his birth, he stopped, that pattern stopped every night, which is pretty crazy to think something that I did a release on actually affected him. And so I wonder if you can just perhaps share an example or some examples of how someone processing their emotions not only shifted things for them, but has also positively impacted the people around them, especially if it's their children or their family or
Yeah, I love that. I love being reminded that that was your experience. Oh, so I'm very much an in the moment type person. So I definitely know the feeling of having many people having these unexpected results or happenings as a result of releasing or processing their emotions. And this is where I've just completed the 10th round of my release group. So, what I'll add is that I no longer run the practitioner training. It's been on a very long sabbatical, and I don't know if I will run it again, but I still teach people and practitioners are people to process their emotions. And I say, just trust the process. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. You're probably not going to get it correct the first few times, but have you been good at anything the first time round? So be consistent, be persistent, be insistent. And this is where I say the magic unfolds. This is where you get messages that you didn't even expect. This is where you start to see the energy of people around you and your environment start to change, down to the conversations are different. Even your animals can respond. And so, more and more as I've been in this work, it's always been about what can you take responsibility to change within yourself and change your energy through processing your emotions. And then everything else starts to change around you rather than your partner or the environment having to change for you, like big things that are actually outside of your control. So, for example, you might have come to me and said, I really want to help my son. He's got this repeated pattern and such and such. And I get asked this question a lot. Can you help my kids? Do you work with kids? I have a channel that keeps on telling me I'm going to work with kids. I'm like, no way. Like, I have no interest in this. And what I say to people is, I'll work on you. And by working with you, you'll be able to help your kids. Because sometimes, well, quite often, there's a communication aspect and you learn to express yourself differently. But the part that changes without you having to consciously shift anything is actually just processing your emotions and clearing your energy that way. And what's surprising is as with the release process, you go into a dialogue with the person that you're releasing on, and you hear everything that you wish or want to receive. And what I have found fascinating is so many people, they have this block around the release and they go, oh, that person will never say this to me. They'll never get to that place. And I'm like, yes, but there is a higher emotionally intelligent version of them in there, and that's what we want to receive. And it's like magic. They go, all right, they do the release begrudgingly, and then all of a sudden they're like, Jen, you'll never guess what? They said everything that I wanted them to say. And, they didn't even believe it. So it is a very interesting process. And yeah, it's all about really clearing your energy and expanding your capacity to receive everything that you desire, whether that be from your kids, your partner, new friends that you're going to attract, work colleague relationships and clients and so on.
yeah, amazing. Well, it never ceases to amaze me when I do a release and then, like you say, you get back the very thing which you didn't imagine could ever come.
Yeah.
Um,
I've got, some examples of people who are estranged from family members and they do a release and that person comes back into their life when sometimes they thought they never wanted them back in their life, but they couldn't ignore the serendipity and the coincidence of doing a release and putting that energy and focus there and then, receiving this opportunity to interact with them. So I don't have specific ones that come to mind because part of what you know of being in a group with me is that I keep that all very confidential. But I guess why we're having this conversation is because we know how magical it is, and you've probably experienced it with your clients as well. The work always
Absolutely.
starts with us.
It always starts with us. So, for someone who's never considered the link between their suppressed emotions and what's going on in their body physically, what would you say is the first step to start noticing what they're holding in their body?
Mm. So this is what I call being blissfully unaware. So your body's reacting and it might be giving you symptoms, but this is where a lot of people go, oh, this is just normal to have back pain. It's just normal to have headaches. And so because they think it's normal, they don't even think to link it to a past or their emotions and so on. And so I feel like this is just acknowledging different people's stages and phases. Some are more sensitive and attuned to listen before they have to hit crisis. But what I'm going to say is they have to want it, and I think there's just right timing around it. And if someone wants to stay blissfully unaware, I don't offer sharing anything with them because I trust that they'll hear the message in a social media post, in a podcast, in a conversation of someone else that starts to like get the light bulb switching on.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've got a gorgeous daughter, Violet, who is nearly 11, same age as my middle boy. And you began working on the work of processing your emotions before you conceived her. And you did a Vipassana, or was it two Vipassanas while you were pregnant with her?
I did one before I fell pregnant, and then I did my I did two. Yeah, I did two. I did a 10-day, and because I had sat a Vipassana prior, I did a 3-day as well whilst I was pregnant with her.
Which led you to a pain-free lotus birth with her. Now, for most people, birth equals pain and a whole lot of it. So, can you just talk us through how you feel the work that you did supported you to have this incredibly positive experience?
Yeah. I really love the foundation of emotional work because it has opened me to opportunities that I didn't even think possible. And it answered some of my curious questions. So I was always curious if people really could have a painless birth, if people could have an orgasmic birth. And I liken it to a little bit when I got really curious about energetics and people talking about less is more. And all I could do was be curious rather than ask how. And so it's just set me on this beautiful path of journeys, including my husband introducing me to Vipassana meditation. And I didn't look into it. I just went and I loved the experience. And I would say that emotional work, psychosomatics, and experiencing Vipassana are two of the most pivotal experiences in my life. So I do find I get to a point with some clients where I'm like, I think you're ready. And if you are ready, you're going to hear about Vipassana left, right, and center. And you just got to be curious and go and experience it. So, the biggest thing that I learned in Vipassana, and this is very much my own experience, is that everything is sensation, even pain is sensation. Pleasure is sensation as well, and to not have an aversion or craving to it. Uh, when I was at university, my friend was a physio and she had to do a study on pain threshold. And so to mimic pain, we had to put our hand into a cold ice bath and it was timed and it was charted. And I didn't last very long. And I was actually an outlier so bad that I was off the charts terrible with my pain tolerance levels. And
Wow.
so they're like, how are you going to handle childbirth? And I was the first of my high school friends to have a baby. And I was 36 weeks pregnant when I had Violet, and I had a feeling that she was going to come 2 weeks early at 38 weeks, and she did. And I kept on waiting for this feeling of transition where it's like, I want this to be over. I want the painkillers. I had organized a home birth, a lotus birth where you keep the placenta attached. And my labor was about 2 hours. And I remember asking the midwife, do you think she's here yet? Thinking this is my transition. And she said, pop your hand down because I didn't want anyone else down there. And I felt her head. I was like, oh my gosh, she's almost here. And I didn't feel like being over it, all this intense pain and so on. Um, and I really just did not experience pain. And so then everything I teach is because of patterns that I've observed. And I thought, okay, is this just an anomaly? What has contributed to this? And so it's only been in the last year or so since I've had other clients break bones, break my ankle, another client have her fourth baby, um, and multiple others with birth and other injuries that you think would be painful. It's only because they didn't experience pain, I thought, oh, what's the common denominator here? All of them have done emotional work. All of them have also taken the next step to actually live a life in alignment with who they truly are. And so I had Violet 11 years ago, and I kind of like kept this story to the side thinking, I don't know what contributes to this, but now I see the pattern play out in other people. So I feel like, well, there's a quote in my book that says, pain is a sensation amplified by emotion. And um, I believe that, yeah, the emotional work, because we have a better relationship with our emotions, better relationship with ourselves, it influences our pain perception. And I often look at kids and how they handle injuries and breaks. And a lot of the time, you think they haven't broken anything because they'll fall asleep, which is a bit of a nervous system response, or they don't seem to be in that much pain. And it's probably because there's not as much responsibility on the line. Whereas I remember my sister riding my horse and it started going fast and she's like, oh, I just don't have the headspace for this anymore because she facets gemstones and she's thinking, oh gosh, what if I fall off the horse? What if I break my hand and then I can't do my work and then I've got a son? So adults go through all the responsibilities that we might have that and the money side of things that can increase the pain in a
Mm.
moment.
Well, actually, I was going to talk about that quote because I know that for a lot of people, pain is something that's bad. We want it to go away. Like if we feel a headache coming on, it's like, quick, get a Panadol. Or, there's all sorts of times in our lives when we're like, well, pain's bad. Don't want this pain. I mean, I know, um, for example, menopause is a big one. We start to get these symptoms which are uncomfortable, right? And maybe a little bit painful. And we want to reach for the first thing that gets rid of that because I don't want that.
Mm,
But actually, the other quote from your book is pain is the gateway to liberation.
mm.
Like, how do you frame pain for people?
Well, pain isn't just physical for me. Pain is whatever's not working in your life that you would rather not have. And I believe as humans, we're either driven to move away from pain or towards pleasure. And I've just been sharing with a group that I'm wrapping up, the release group, about how on reflection over the last decade, I realized from 2011 through to 2016, I was really driven to move away from pain. And then from 2016 onwards, it was about a life, creating a life more towards pleasure. But when I had the 2020 pivot with the pandemic, that was definitely moving away from pain and that was definitely being driven by fear. So that's an example of pain that wasn't physical, but once upon a time I did have the cystic acne and I wanted it to go away. I just wanted my skin to be better. And I thought that was going to give me the world. And then, of course, I was given the better skin, and then I had new challenges to delve into. Um, so pain is the gateway to liberation. For me, it's I can look back on my story in a really positive light. I am so grateful because it sent me on the pathway of processing my emotions. It sent me on the pathway of incredible manifestations. And I love that I had that experience. I didn't love it at the time, but I do believe we all have this ability to transmute pain into something positive, into pleasure, into manifestation. Manifestation of our desires, because we also manifest our challenges and pain.
Yes. So, yeah, earlier this year you released your first book, Healing Beyond the Diagnosis. And I say first because hopefully there'll be more.
I do.
Um,
There's a second one.
and I love that at the beginning of each chapter there are these short nuggets of wisdom, um, one of them that I love is it's not complex, it's emotional. And I think that really sums up, yeah, what we as humans try to make things complex, and actually it's just quite simple. And yeah, the other one is it's simple, not easy, referring to your release process. This is so true because the release process is so deceptively simple, but it's not really easy in terms of it's uncomfortable, and we have to be willing to go into that discomfort. Can you just give people a little outline of what the release process, how it works?
Mm. It's funny because each of those quotes before each chapter could have pretty much a whole book or an hour conversation around them. So I do want to just share what each of them mean to me. So it's not complex, it's emotional, you're so right. It's the human wants to make something so simple, so complex. And when you do the release process, for me, the difference with it compared to other emotional work is that you get a message. You get a message from your experience. Because we walk around and we say, oh, this is for me, there's an opportunity in this trigger, and so on. It's like, okay, well, there's a way to actually find it. And that's what I see the difference in the release process. But sometimes the message that comes through is so simple that the human goes, it can't be that easy. We make it more complex. Or even the release process is so simple and people go and add to it. They make it bigger and longer and harder. And it's like, well, I don't want it to be hard because then you're not going to actually access it the more hard you see it. And then it's simple, not easy. I think this relates to so many things in life is especially business is a good representation, is it often comes back to the simplest foundations. But I think we feel uncomfortable in the space that we create for ourselves in this structure that we make it more complex. We add, we do, rather than just relax in, what we've created. So, when it doesn't feel easy, that's where I feel like support is really valuable. And what I've seen is that my process and the instructions on how to do it, it has a structure because I say masculine structure creates feminine flow. It's become a lot more refined, but it hasn't actually changed at the core of it. I've just gotten better at describing it to people, finding different formats like speaking it out, or the book really revealed to me how different it was to translate my spoken words into written words and how the written version of it landed for people easier than the verbal version and so on. Um, and how when people are actually doing it, not just conceptualizing it or just consuming the knowledge, when they're actually doing it and experiencing it, that's where the best learning is. So this is a long-winded answer because it was very hard for me to actually share the process in the book. It's a four-step process. The easiest one that I say everyone can start with that they think, oh, that's too easy, is just scream. Scream every day for 3 weeks and see what happens. And you don't even need to know what you are processing about. You don't even need to go in and analyze anything. That's why it's so easy. I call it an emergency release button. And then the second, third, and fourth steps of the process make up a verbal dialogue. And so there's very specific prompts for you to embody and verbalize within that process that helps you um, really take responsibility for what you're holding in yourself. It allows you to truly come from a place of compassion and understanding for the other person. I mean, we release on more than just people in releases, but that's the most basic version. And there's an opportunity to really give your younger version of yourself support and healing. So, um, it was difficult for me to share it in the book because I have seen when the sneaky human gets in the way and finds things hard, and some emotions are difficult to access and events are difficult to process. That's when people butcher it. That's when they change it up and make something so simple, so complex. Um, and that's why I really value support, and that's me having my eyes on people's releases. But I did want to give people an opportunity to be able to try out the basic form of the release. It's been really interesting. The feedback coming from people is that they just read it and they get emotional. They don't even start using the process. Um, and there is the odd person that will just nail the process and really understand my instructions from the get-go. And usually people who do the releases with me with support, who initially thought this is too complicated, it's not working, they go back and read it after a series of weeks of experiencing, releasing, and getting feedback, and they go, "Oh, this really is exactly how you say it should be." It's just interesting. It's how the human perceives time. You know, time never changes, but it either goes for a long time or a short time. The words on those pages will never change. They're in print. I don't think I'll be editing them. Um, but each time we go back and read and experience something, we see it with a different lens. Very
Absolutely.
long-winded answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I suppose my my experience would be that definitely to begin with, I felt I don't think I ever could have done a release on my own without having been guided through it. Because I think I would have, that sneaky human in me would have avoided those parts.
Yeah.
It's having someone to gently guide you into those corners that you just wouldn't go into otherwise.
Mm,
And yeah, once you have been guided through it, it does become much easier to do it yourself because you're able to understand the process and see where you need to go and maybe how you're trying to shortcut it or not.
yeah.
But it is such an easy process of basically speaking out loud, isn't it?
Yeah.
The
It is.
release process is speaking out loud things that we often have never said or we've been ashamed to say out loud or scared to say out loud or to even think those thoughts
Yeah.
because we get, we get the message, oh, you can't possibly hate someone or
Yeah.
think that thing. And so the release is really all about moving that energy from inside of us into a verbal form so that it's released from our body, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people feel like, oh, I shouldn't be saying these things, or mindset coaches or even manifestation coaches tell you, don't speak about what you don't want. But the reality is that if you cannot override it with mindset or new positive thought patterns, the reality is it's in you, the energy is like filtering out and it's affecting all facets of your life. And so it's a very intentional pocket of time to allow yourself to be safe, seen, heard, and understood. And some people, I was sharing with a release group, this isn't about teaching you to counsel yourself or therapy yourself because you'll always have your limitations. You'll only ever work on what you can see. And there's also value in having a group of like-minded people that you feel safe enough. And sometimes you inspire one another to actually go, oh, I can go there and nothing bad's going to happen. So yeah, that's the sneaky human where the process is there, but we often stop and question it. Or as I said earlier, the magic is people actually, if they can in the release process express exactly what they need and receive what they need, then that's when it actually happens in their real life. And so the release process for me, the first thing, the two main things it really exposes for me is how people don't actually know how to request what they need and how much of a block they have to actually receiving what they need. And so my basic version of the release process is always teaching people to process on a trigger on a person. But we go into organs, we go into emotional states, inanimate objects, and more recently, I've been helping people connect in with the other side. So loved ones passed over, even pets. It's crazy. It's awesome. Um, and so many people have this resistance on okay, well, that person will never say the thing to me. I'm like, yes, but it's not about this person anymore because you're also blocking receiving from anyone that you're going to meet in your life or money. Money is the biggest thing that people probably have a block around. So it's understanding that everything that's happening right now that you don't like is rooted in a pattern. And the things that are also happening that you like are rooted in patterns, and you get to create new patterns of those to bring in more of what you desire in the future.
Well, I remember you saying once that, this is like a role play, a dialogue. And if you can't act this out with no one in your space, how are you going to actually do that in real life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I see so many people who, like you said, can't speak up for what they want, or can't, it will find it even difficult to say the words out loud, and it's just me in the space with them, and they can't actually say those things out loud. So if they can't say them out loud and it's just to me,
Mm.
what's going to happen when they're in real life
Yeah.
with those people? They're not going to be able to express themselves, basically.
Exactly. And it helps you with your communication. And I have this little cycle of growth and evolution. And I say the fifth pillar, which, happens at all stages and phases, is about leading yourself and communicating differently and being able to have the uncomfortable conversations. Now, there are some things that should only be said in a release and not in a real life conversation. Depends what stage and phase you're in with that relationship with that person that you're going to talk to. Um, and it's about building that safety to be able to say it to yourself, to say it to a practitioner that might be facilitating, then expand that safety into a group of trusted, like-minded people, and then go and have the conversations with people that you cross paths with. I mean, the idea is that you actually shift your energy so much and you show up in a way that you don't attract having to have so many difficult conversations, but you do embrace them and embody them if that opportunity comes.
And so when you guide someone through releasing their stored emotions, what are the common aha moments that surprise people about the process and the outcomes?
Mm. So different people have different aha moments at in different sections of the releases. So there's sort of like three parts to a release. Sometimes it varies depending on what and who or the thing that we're releasing on, the situation. But for some people in the first section, it's like this, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had all of this in me. Or like, oh my gosh, this feels amazing to get all of this out. Um, so they often realize the correlation between their physical pain or their mental, behavioral, or the pain in their life and how it's linked in this event. It's like they start channeling and get all these different messages and thought patterns coming through. Uh, well, a lot of people do realize that they have difficulty asking for what they need, even if it's in this scenario where you're not actually having a conversation with a real person. In the second section, the biggest realization is that they can't receive what they need, that there is a real block there for other people because in that second section of the release process, they have it shared with them why they feel the way they do. And so many people actually avoid the feelings. Like this work, the somatic part of this work really is how do you feel? Can you be present with how you feel as you share, everything that's been held inside of you? Can you feel what's going on in your body as you receive everything, the truth that your body or that person has to speak back to you? So it's really different. And then for some people, like the third part usually is this younger self type release where there's a lot of healing and support. For some people, that's where all of their emotion is. So it's varied. Depends on the person, depends on their situation, depends on their releases.
And so why do you think that so many of us, when we want to avoid facing our own emotions, even when it's pretty clear they're impacting our health or our relationships?
Hmm. I feel like it's because we know that we can function in that low level of discomfort. And so it's relatively comfortable because it's known. Most people don't like to step into the unknown. Everyone has a different risk profile. And what I'll say is that when you get your messages from your releases, they are going to tell you things need to change. And there'll be very simple instructions. And I feel like, well, there's some people that are very good with self-directed learning and implementation. But when you get into what I call the second phase of discomfort, so the first phase is processing your emotions, the emotional mess, the part that most people bypass. When you do the emotional work, you do realize how you need to show up. There's an identity shift. There is a vision to step into. There is a message to integrate into the vision of the life that you desire. And that's what I call the second phase of discomfort. You know the moves that you've got to make, but they're unknown, they're foreign, you don't have evidence for them. And they're uncomfortable because sometimes it means that people are going to respond to that different version of you, the true version of you. It means that you're going to have to set boundaries. And sometimes it means that you start letting go of friendships and workplaces and relationships and situations that no longer serve you. And people will project their fear and they'll project their judgment. Sometimes they're triggered because you're making the moves and they want you to be held back to where they're at. Now, I'm going to say that in my life, I haven't had to let go of a lot of people by any means, and it hasn't been horrible or hard or anything like that. Um, but yeah, that's why I think that a lot of people would rather stay in their pain because there's more people in pain than there are in their pleasure. And it's easier to talk about pain in conversation than the good stuff that's going on. And so when people get into that identity shift of really embodying who they desire to be, I say what's often missing is those people to inspire you, to support you, and to actually celebrate the wins. So that's another realization when people start processing their emotions, because we also do positive releases, is that they're very uncomfortable celebrating, or they've been shut down or ashamed for celebrating the small stuff and the big stuff.
Yeah, and that pain really, or that keeps us in that drama, right?
Mm,
Keeps us stuck in that I'll just blame this and blame that,
yeah,
and that will keep have me something to keep that drama going on in my life, quite
absolutely.
quite unconsciously, obviously, but
Yeah. And it's interesting, if I hear people in their little pain parties, I actually just stay silent. Let them find their own way.
so I used to have this idea that if I did all there was to do, so released on everything, and I'd get to this pace of no problems, no pain, never any issues. But I've really come to see through this work that that's not how life works, and that we're going to encounter challenges and pain and injuries. We're not going to avoid them. But if we do this work and process our past, what's going to be different is our relationship to these challenges, and an understanding that rather than resisting what's happening, if we're open and curious, there'll be a message for us.
Yeah.
And I know a big part of this moment for me was when you broke your ankle. And suddenly I was like, oh, how could this be?
Yeah.
Jin's broken her ankle. But I mean, can you just talk us through that experience for you? Because I think that'll help people understand how your relationship with a problem becomes different.
Yeah, absolutely. You're asking really great questions, which makes me just see how much work you've done and the work you've done working with people as well, because that's really where the learning is in terms of, you don't get good enough and then you put the work out there, you learn as you're going. So I love it. I love it, Emily. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm really grateful for that I feel like I've communicated pretty well, and if I haven't, here I am saying it, is that this work doesn't necessarily stop you from having challenges in your life. And as I've stepped more into the manifestation piece, I've seen how the universe sends you challenges. And now I get excited about these challenges because I've created so much evidence of how I've been able to move through them and create massive growth in all facets of my life. So, I when I did break my ankle at the end of 2021, it came after a series of big changes in my life, which I'll share in a minute. But I remember thinking, well, what are people going to think about me if I get sick, if I receive a diagnosis, etc.? And I'm not here touting that, um, this is going to stop all illness because I've also had some beautiful clients that, whilst we're working with one another, receive diagnoses and have challenges. And what I've seen is as I've lent more into the emotional work and been able to see that there is a gift and an opportunity in this much quicker than most people, they have been able to, yeah, integrate this experience and open themselves up to so many opportunities. So I very much see that the challenges we receive are a test, especially when we desire something bigger and better in our life. That is bigger energy to hold than the challenges and pain that we've experienced. So I see that when we're given those challenges, it's the universe saying, all right, Jen, or whoever, are you really ready to hold this success energy? Because that's bigger energy. So let's see if you can handle this. Let's see how quickly you can navigate it. Does it pull you away from your bigger vision or does it help you lean in? So at the end of 2021, I decided to sell my clinic business, my osteo business. I had a couple of locations, I had a team, and I was mulling over this decision for a very long time. And it's not usual for me to mull over a decision for 18 months. I'm usually very quick with it. And as soon as I made the decision, I had a buyer within 3 days. I settled on that clinic sale within a month. And then I took myself off to a retreat because I knew the power of celebration. And on that retreat, I declared what my 2022 was going to look like. And it was that I was going to get back into horse riding because that was something that I had pushed aside a lot, saying one day, one day, one day. And I also said that I'm going to get fit and get a personal trainer. And I love the version of me that chooses to do things now rather than at the turn of a year. So I went horse riding on my first horse trek in a long time with Gav and Violet, and I hired a personal trainer, my friend Holly. And on the 30th of, I also bought myself a new e-bike. I was going to do the Dunstan Trail with my friend. And on the 30th of December, I went for an easy bike ride down by the lake. I went into a ditch. I knew the ditch was there and I didn't commit to it. Fell to the side, heavy e-bike, broke my first bone ever, which was my ankle. And I thought I just snapped a ligament, like I heard it crack and I felt it. Um, and I was like, oh my gosh. Um, this is a massive challenge, but also at the same time, I was making massive moves. I let go of my clinic and I decided to commit full time, eggs all in one basket to the art of listening to your body. What was interesting is I didn't experience a lot of pain from that break. Like I continued bike riding and then I decided maybe I'll go see the physio and get a moon boot because it was over New Year's. Um, and yeah, I had a little bit of discomfort being in the cast with swelling, but I didn't have pain. Um, and what was interesting with that break is that it also didn't heal on an expected timeline. So 6 weeks for a bone to heal. I went and got an X-ray and they told me it had healed. But because I was still registered as an osteopath and I had access to looking at the images, I pulled up my own X-ray and I was like, it's healed because I was walking on it. Um, I pulled up the X-ray and I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's a line straight through my fibula. And my dad used to be a radiographer, so I said, "Can you have a look at this?" And he said, "No, it's still broken. No signs of bone filling in that gap." And I spent about $10,000 on a CEMF, continuous electromagnetic frequency device, that was shown to help bone healing. I bought a pulsed electromagnetic frequency mat. I did the comfrey, I did the homeopathics, the supplements, etc. I was low on vitamin D, so I took those supplements and it just didn't heal. And I found myself in the cycle of getting x-rays. I had about 5 x-rays. And I was like, you know what, Jen, this feels fine. About 12 months in, it started to show signs of healing. But I was like, hang on, what do I feel, regardless of what the results show? I feel fine. I rode a horse. I bought my first horse with a broken ankle. I went for rides. My foot would go dead, but I felt fine. So it's like, hang on, how can I be driven by feeling rather than what the x-rays and people are telling me? Um, and as I released on this experience, my message that came through, and my messages don't always make sense at the time, but now I trust them, is be patient, you've done the work. So that was the start of 2022, all of 2022, and then I feel like that message is finally landing for me in 24 and 2025. So now it makes sense. It almost became an affirmation for me that I would speak out most days. Jin, you've done the work, be patient. And it really triggers me because a lot of people outside would say, Jin, be patient, because I move really fast. And I noticed that I felt triggered. But now I am embodying more of this, less of the masculine push and more of the feminine. The less is more. And I'm tapping into those energetics. So, yeah, it's not only me. It's clients, I've finished the last round of release and some people have had things ramp up a little bit or new things come up. And so I desire everyone to just embrace each challenge that comes their way. Where is it asking you to dig deeper with the message? I shared with you that for the for the fourth time in 5 years, I'm sick, like I'm just recovering from something. And historically, if you go back into my pain story, I was getting sick like every second week or every weekend. And then when I took steps in alignment to open up my clinic, move to Wanaka, and be the osteopath that would talk about emotions, I was still getting sick every couple of months. A lot of like allergies, tickly cough type thing. And then when I made my big shift online in 2020, I stopped getting sick so much, even though I was actually pushing a lot, like with creating new things. So in 2021, I got sick with the same tickly throat and the cough. And that was because my first release group had 70 people on it. And that was huge. That was huge on my nervous system. The next time I got sick was 2023 when I was organizing a hay order for people and it was just really stressful. I always say people don't make you sick. Like I was stressed, I acknowledge that. In 2024, last year, mid 2024, I got sick again. And that was before I made a big investment in a coaching program. And actually, that coaching program was so amazing. It gave me a massive return on investment in all areas of my life, particularly financially. And now I find myself making another big decision, another leap on should I invest in myself? Um, all of this stuff is possible, but what if it doesn't work? I still have this narrative, what if this fails? What if it's a big fat waste of money? Because I have had experiences in the past where I've invested big and I probably haven't made the most of it. But I also have evidence of investing big when I didn't even have the money and it paying off massively. So I see that this is what's playing on my mind. This is why I've got this tickly thing, and no one else around me is sick. Like, there is no way I got this from anyone. And so I'm just being curious and very transparent that, hey, I do go through these challenges, but gosh, if I was getting sick every 2 months or every couple of weeks, there's something wrong. There's something that I'm not listening to.
Yeah, so it's really embracing that something's coming up, and
Yeah,
that just means that maybe we're being challenged to expand ourselves. Maybe we're being challenged to really see where are we in alignment or where are we slightly out of alignment, and not to see the getting sick or the breaking the ankle or the whatever as a bad thing,
Mm.
but more a check of, yeah, hey, just something maybe needs your attention here.
Yeah,
Have a look and see what you might be being called to do or not do or
yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah. Because this is the same sickness that I used to get back in the day that was asking me to move. And so I thought, gosh, if I really want to get better, if I want my acne, my skin, the ankle stiffness, which I'm pretty sure was an autoimmune joint condition, like I didn't need to go and find out. I knew as an osteopath how it presented. If I wanted to shift the autoimmune lichen sclerosis, what are the moves I've got to make? And I've got to go find out. And so it's happened a lot less frequently, a lot less intensely. And in the last 5 years, historically, my evidence is every time this happens, not that I need this to happen, every time it happens, there's been massive expansion on the other side. So that's what I'm playing with, and a trust in myself that I do know how to put the right masculine work in. Um, and yeah, I'm coming back to this place that I think a lot of people will be when they make investments in themselves is, my mind's asking how, is getting all the logical mind gets in the way of what our heart desires. So if I go back to my initial hit that I really trust because I've emptied out my emotional cup and I still do that, is, well, my heart says yes and just trust.
Yeah, and just it also reminds me going back to, how our relationship to challenges is different. The same year that you broke your ankle, my husband broke his, and I remember
Oh my gosh, right?
receiving some messages from family and friends and things, and they were quite dramatic. Oh no, this is the worst thing. How terrible, how awful, and kind of again that drama. And actually, we were both sitting in it more of a place of like, oh wow, like look
Yeah,
at this.
I know. It was amazing.
And actually, it's not the worst thing in the world. And where is this going to bring us more into alignment?
Yeah. Well, because it was his ankle and it was also his bicep. He ruptured that.
Yes, that's right.
And it all happened in close succession. And he just bought, you guys just got a boat. I was like, hang on, he's meant to be out on the boat, but then he couldn't even
Couldn't
do
even
that,
be out
right?
on it.
So yeah, I love that. And you guys have both done the work with me. And I'm sure that's had a positive influence on your kids. You understood like the different constitutions and personality types of your kids as well. And I just love the easiness that you've both had in embracing challenges, not just all those years back, but recently as well.
Yeah, well, it's definitely changed the way I look at challenges and receive them.
Mm.
Yeah, so Jen, your work is just way more than processing emotions. In your book, at the end, you say the emotions we avoid hold the keys to our deepest liberation. Once you process what's been stored, you open up the doors to everything that you've desired. And I can imagine that there might be a perception out there that this work is all about the past, the uncomfortable, the unpleasant, the things that we don't want to look at, but it's so much more than that.
Mm.
What is on the other side of processing your emotions?
Yeah. So the book Healing Beyond the Diagnosis is the first time that I have put out not just the pain space, but the pleasure space. And so it is actually a really activating and positive read because you realize this pain can be transmuted into pleasure, into manifestation of the life that you desire. And so that's another transition that I'm trying to work on is letting people know about the manifestation side of things that is available that you've increased your capacity for as a result of doing the first phase of discomfort, moving through that, the phase that most people bypass. So I love manifestation and trying to speak about it a bit more. But basically, you said it before, access your past to access your future. So when you get into manifestation practice of the life that you want, they ask you to visualize what that life looks like, imagine it, feel it, and most importantly, embody the emotions of that future version of yourself. And a lot of the time, people do not have evidence for what that looks like, feels like, and what emotions are present. So that's where they usually get stuck when it comes to manifestation. And also, a lot of people in the manifestation space, when you hit blocks, will tell you to go back and work on your past, work on your emotions, work on your trauma, work on whatever. And why I say processing your emotions and accessing your past is so important is because you actually have evidence for it. You know it happened. You know that you suppressed your emotions because you didn't know how or you didn't have space and time. And so now you're going to have the know-how, a release process that you go and learn and you practice it, you get feedback, and that allows you to process experiences in your life where emotions weren't processed or expressed. And you get to sit with these as they come to the surface, and you get to feel safe in these emotions. And so you have evidence for this. So go and work on the stuff you've got evidence for. Go and feel safe in those emotions, both the positive and the negative ones, because they're all normal And then you work through this first phase of discomfort. Naturally, what happens, you empty out your emotional cup, you create space for more, you get the message of what you need to actually implement as your next step to liberate yourself, the simple message. But you also realize perhaps how much you haven't been living the authentic version of yourself. So this allows you to work out what your identity is, the true version of yourself that you desire to express. That's what a lot of my clients want. And then what happens is you realize, oh, I've got to take steps to actually create this in my life. So we also have to have that emotional capacity and that nervous system capacity to take on the new work that is manifestation. And there is another structure and process that I have for people, just like the release process. So there's these kind of two distinct phases that I work with people, and there's this transition where you don't really know where it happens. But you kind of know that it has to happen. And, it took me quite a few years. And now I see that the vision piece, the manifestation piece is what comes after the emotional work. But it doesn't mean the emotional work ends, because as you go through, you attract new challenges to test you. Are you ready for this next version of yourself? So you embrace it. So you still need to go back and, have this ability to process. As you take steps forwards, your body feels safe and it trusts you to deal with some stuff that maybe it was suppressed that you didn't remember when you first started the journey. So you got to hold both the pain and the pleasure at the same time. So the manifestation piece is where you really can do the quantum leaps, where you can collapse time. And I've brought incredible things into my life. And I just get curious, well, what else is on the cards?
Amazing. Well, you have manifested some pretty incredible things. The incredible, what do you call it? Lotus space that you're in
Yeah,
at the
Lotus,
moment.
this Lotus Dome, which prior to getting this structure, this building, my office, that was full of challenges, included a building that just did not survive the weather here. So, yeah, that was very interesting. The horses, the property, the house, the amazing clients that I get to work with. Yeah, and all of the unknown that I'm about to step into.
Well, Jin, we could talk forever. Thank you so much for all that you bring into the world. Thank you for trusting me all those years ago and giving me that chance, because without that chance, I wouldn't be where I am today. And yeah, I'm really, really grateful for that. Thank you
Mm.
for sharing your wisdom today and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. And I've just seen your growth in the questions that you've asked me. So hopefully other people understand where we're both coming from and the power of this work.
Thanks for listening to the Wholesome Wave podcast. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who could use a little wave of inspiration in their life. If you would like to explore emotional release work more deeply, you can connect with me at thewholesomewave.com. Remember, the healing you create in yourself ripples out to your loved ones and beyond.